Enrico! 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 What's wrong?
My stomach, it's erupting.
Are you shot? I don't see any blood.
No, it's the beef.
I'll go get a medic.
Okay.
I couldn't find any. Are you okay, my boy? Glad I didn't eat the beef.
Stop.
Chat, let's pause. Hold your horses.
Now let's talk about this. So this was during the Spanish-American War era, where there was 9-to-1 ratio of soldiers dying of food poisoning rather than being shot.
What?
Now this wasn't just during the war. This would also happen all over the US, where there was millions of people and children dying from these food.
I meant this food, not these food.
This food, specifically the meat, has a lot of diseases, and that's how people are dying. This is being made in the factories. Let's take a look now.
All done. No, there's no toilet paper. Oh, shucks. Well, good enough to me.
Alright, it's time to get back to work.
My hand! It fell off!
What's all this ruckus? Why aren't we working?
My hand fell off, sir.
Okay, then. You're alive. Get back to work.
But
Or else
sir-
you're fired. You're fired or else. Sir, this almost fell in the meat grinder. What do you want me to do with it? It's fine. Just put it in there. It'll kill the rats if they try to get in it. All right. Oh, and put this in there too. Is that a hand? Not anymore. Now get back to work. I'm not paying you to talk. All right.
Breaking news, okay. Meat industries are under attack by the media for their for their bad meat. Cops on scene now.
Wait, I swear, sir, I didn't put anything on that. No. What was that?
Breaking news here today. Manager Jaquavion was arrested for bad conditions in his work environment. Want to give us more info?
Well, last week I was cutting the meat up and my hand, like I slipped and I hit my hand and it fell off. And so I like was cutting it up and it fell in the cart. And the manager came over and he was like, "Hey, what's that?" And I said, "Oh, that's my hand, sir. It fell off." And he just took it away. And I tried to tell him not to, but he still did it.
So do you think it ended up in the grinder?
I was sure so.
In other words, his meat sucks. Don't buy it.
Stop.
Chat, let's pause. Hold your horses. Because these factories weren't clean, they had things like steak, beef, rats all on the floor, and they would actually step over some of the meat to get to other piles. After this, they would throw it in the grinder, and it could be moldy, it could be old, and it didn't matter. Not only that, but they also would grind up things like rats, human fingers occasionally, and anything else into the food and ship it out. were no regulations on food, the meat industries could send out harsh chemicals and other materials in the products, and people wouldn't know. This caused sicknesses and infections to spread rampantly.
What?
This problem went on for a very long time, but eventually a lot of people started to get involved. And after a few books and documentaries came out about this topic, the government got involved and passed 3 acts to stop this problem. The Meat Inspection Act, Poison Squad, and the Pure Food and Drug Act were all ways that the government helped to stop this problem. After these laws were passed, people were forced to wash their hands and keep their work environments clean. Here's a video that explains it better.
Conditions in meatpacking plants during the Industrial Revolution were unsafe, unhygienic, and full of literal death. And not just the kind you'd expect. Although much of this has changed today, it's still worth acknowledging that these unspeakable practices were totally legal a little over a century ago. So, today, we're inspecting the nightmarish conditions in industrial meatpacking plants. But before we get started, in 1906, Upton Sinclair's novel The Jungle was published to equal parts acclaim and horror. It was a fictionalized account of how awful working conditions were in the meatpacking industry, taken primarily from real experiences. The book was a wake-up call in the business of food, and in the business of high school English classes looking for more required reading. So how bad was it? Well, it wasn't for the squeamish, and incidentally, neither is this episode. You've been warned. Machines in packing plants made work faster and more streamlined, but at what cost? Most of the machines had sharp parts for cutting and pressing, and all it took was a hand or finger to get into the works for it to be crushed or severed. Nobody showed any of these to the producers of Saw. But the dangers weren't always as obvious as you might expect. Sinclair wrote The Jungle based on real accounts overheard while he was undercover in some of the plants. In one passage, he describes a particularly bizarre but no less debilitating hazard, writing, "Let a man so much as scrape his finger pushing a truck in the pickle rooms, and he might have a sore that would put him out of the world. All the joints in his fingers might be eaten by the acid one by one. Man, what are you putting in that brine?" Sinclair continues, as freshman English students everywhere cringe, "Of the butchers and floorsmen, the beef boners and trimmers, of all those who used knives, you could scarcely find a person who had the use of his thumb. Time and time again, the base of it had been slashed, till it was a mere lump of flesh against which the man pressed the knife to hold it. The hands of these men would be crisscrossed with cuts until you could no longer pretend to count them or trace them." While cuts are a reasonable occupational hazard for a butcher, the speed of the machines forced factory workers to move so fast they were slashing their hands into lumps of scar tissue. In Stephen Sondheim's musical Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street, the titular madman and his accomplice, Mrs. Lovett, turned the town people of London into meat pies, transforming their customers into inadvertent cannibals. Luckily, a macabre story like that could never happen in real life, right? Well, in these industrial meatpacking plants, hair, skin, blood, and even amputated limbs would sometimes get into the canned meat, especially sausage and lard, and would get shipped out without being checked. That's one Happy Meal surprise nobody wants. In The Jungle, Sinclair also talks about workers falling into lard vats where they lay undiscovered for hours or even days. Lard is made by dissolving fat, so any human body submerged in that vat would simply become a part of the product. And every single one of you just put down what you were eating. As Sinclair writes, as for the other men, who worked in tank rooms full of steam, and in some of which there were open vats near the level of the floor, their peculiar trouble was that they fell into the vats, and when they were fished out, there was never enough of them left to be worth exhibiting. Sometimes they would be overlooked for days, till all but the bones of them had gone out to the world as Durham's pure leaf lard. Again, Sinclair's book was fiction, but it was all based on what he had learned from factory workers and what he'd witnessed himself. And it's not hard to believe that a 19th century corporation would weigh the cost of dumping an entire vat of product versus simply pretending nobody'd ever fallen into it and go for the latter. Heck, there's a few modern companies that would probably make that call.
In conclusion, this meat was no good.